So thanks very much for that. And what I'm going to do is going to give the speakers a chance to ask any questions or make any points in relation to the others, and then I will open it up to the floor. I've certainly got a lot of questions, and if you've got questions, by all means, keep them in mind and ask them in a couple of minutes. Do you want to come back?
I'd like to ask a couple of questions about
Excellent.
it. Yeah. I probably misunderstood this, but you seem to be talking about the power this power of being able to do one thing or the other, as though you would take it for granted that it's just there. What makes you think this is a real power, not
I'm certainly it sounded as though I was taking it for granted. I think that to begin with, one can launch this investigation while remaining fairly neutral about whether the power exists. What I'm immediately interested in is the fact that we clearly do believe in it, and we clearly put it to work in our ethical life. Now, that being the case, what one wants to do is to work out what the content of the idea is and where it might possibly come from, which one can go a fair way along doing, I think, before finally coming to a clear verdict as to whether the idea actually applies, which is going to be a very difficult thing to sort out. The reason why I think one ought to start off by investigating the idea with a degree of, shall we say, neutrality about what nature ultimately contains, is that I think that English language philosophy particularly has been bedeviled by people who immediately get interested in the question of what is there really in nature, and then try and strong-arm everything in common sense psychology to fit their preferred picture. Thomas Hobbes, in the 17th century, was the fons and origo of this particular case of the marmot. I mean, he's a brilliant philosopher. He has an extremely simple view of what the world contains. It's a very simple form of materialism. Therefore, everything in human psychology, the way we think about human psychology, must unproblematically fit into that. And he is actually one of the people who actually falsifies, I think, the contents of human experience even, in order to make his metaphysics system work. He thinks that belief in a power of up-to-usness that depends for its operation not on the absence of prior causal predetermination, because it doesn't fit into his picture of the world, which is an entirely materialistic, deterministic system, must therefore be the creation of some sort of gratuitous imagination. He thinks it's the product of ignorance of causes. If you don't know the causes of your actions, you postulate something else. Now, I just don't think that's plausible, but I think it also prevents you really understanding what's going on within the psychological framework, because you distorted too much already. I said too much, so I'll just stop there.
Well, I just wanted to come back to, if I may.
Yeah.
It sounds to me as though you're privileging subjective experience over certain empirical evidence. For example, I mentioned the most famous is the talk about the Libet experiments.
Can I say something about Libet? Because I don't think Libet actually shows very much. I'm not challenging the empirical data he brings in, but it's absolutely important to realise that Libet imports some very, very debatable assumptions into his interpretation of those data. One assumption he absolutely works with, which is one that people often make, which is that the exercise of the power of freedom or a decision-making capacity must be something inherently conscious. That as soon as it's going on, you must be conscious of it. Now that's very, very debatable. Look, if you think that decisions and the power of freedom are part of nature, actually I do, I'm going to start becoming a little more clean, but that'll be bracken question, then there's a perfectly sensible model of how you find out about it, which applies to other parts of nature as well. The fact or the thing occurs in nature. As a result of it, you become aware of it. That, I think, is true of my desires, it's true of motions in my body, it's true of facts in the external world. I think it's true of my beliefs. I come to hold a belief. As a result of holding a belief, I come to realise that I have a belief. And I think this process is causal. The effect is coming to realise something, is liable temporarily to succeed, perhaps with a small interval, what it's an awareness of. So I see no problem in the idea of exercising a power of free decision-making slightly in advance of becoming aware that you've exercised it. It's only going to be a problem to think that that's the case if you have some argument why the exercise of the power of freedom must be inherently conscious. Libet provides no such argument. And I think actually there are other reasons why we tend to associate consciousness with freedom, which actually explain the association, but which also tolerate a degree of temporal interval between the exercise of freedom and our becoming aware of it.
Just to make that quite clear, you do acknowledge that most people don't think of human will as an unconscious thing. I mean,
Absolutely, I agree with that. There's a strong tendency to think that you couldn't have an exercise of the will without becoming fairly smartly conscious of it. And that's not wrong. But Libet needs more than that. He needs the thought that the very act of the will itself has got to have consciousness, and the exercise of freedom itself has got to have consciousness built into it. I see that he provides no reason for thinking this. I don't think we're actually committed to that.
So can I just be clear in my own mind? You're talking about will as an unconscious faculty, human faculty.
I'm thinking it's a faculty that, like all faculties in us, when we become aware of it, we become aware of it just after we've exercised it. But it's conscious in this sense. I think there are very strong grounds for thinking, unlike some other faculties, you couldn't have a faculty of the will doing its job without pretty smartly becoming conscious of its operation. And that's because of the way that the faculty of the will is involved in planning. The faculty of the will, when you take a decision, has got to impact your beliefs about what you're going to do in order for it to do its job of enabling you to coordinate what you've decided on with the remainder of your action. That's the planning function of the will. That means it's got to intrude into your consciousness fairly smartly, but not necessarily at the very moment of its exercise.
But is that an experience? I mean, that's what you're talking about, is experience.
Well, look, again, I've been a bit slapdash, so I mean, that's the level I'm afraid. I think consciousnness means consciousness in the sense of coming to believe that, not necessarily having a phenomenological experience at the time.
How does oh, I'm so sorry.
It's okay, it's okay. I just had to check whether you wanted.
How does an act of will which is unconscious differ from a reflex act?
I think it differs from a reflex act because acts of will are distinguished by being, and this is something else I want to say, people have been talking about what distinguishes us from the animals as being consciousness or freedom. Actually, if you'd gone to any medieval philosophy and said what distinguishes us from the animals, they wouldn't have said consciousness, they think animals are perfectly conscious. They'd have said rationality. And that, of course, is a condition of and underlying freedom. And I think what distinguishes the act of, in common sense psychology, the will is distinguished in terms of the way in which capacity for rationality is being exercised. When you take a decision, you're exercising capacity for rationality to apply reason as it governs your actions. That's the job the will does, as the will be conceived. That's why it has a planning function, and that's why it's got to intrude into your beliefs about what you're going to do. That's reflex acts. Need to have nothing to do with any capacity to respond to reasons.
So that's a difference from animal freedom, because an animal can choose to take this path or that path, but it's not based on...
I don't think animals do what we do. I'm meant to be convinced that they do what we do, which is think about justifications. That's something we do that I don't think anyone's even discovered chimps doing. Actually reflecting about justifications for and against beliefs, decisions, actions. And the fact of the will is precisely about enabling us to apply our reflections about what we have justification for doing. That's why you take decisions. You deliberate and you decide to do the sensible thing.